Good afternoon. Today is April 30th. Yep, that's Thursday, April 30th. And it is 2 o'clock, and this is the Ways and Means Committee. And we are looking up S 325 and ideally voting on it as well. Floor is yours, Ellen, to tell us all about it. I imagine everyone has some context for this, yes? Okay, great. Okay, great. Ellen, not giving the context.
Kowski, Office of Legislative Counsel. I'm here on S 325 as voted out of House Environment a little while ago. I have given you today a section by section summary, as well as the document. I have been made aware that there are some typos in the section by section. I apologize for that. Drafted it between committees. And I'll make sure the editors see it and we'll fix those. But I thought
more important than having better the mistakes there than on the actual bill.
Well, then I thought maybe you'd want to see the summary in case the document, it's a 30-page bill, so not that long for an Act 250 bill.
No, section by section is great. Yeah.
So I have the language, or would you like me to walk through the section by section? Which would you
I
prefer?
think we should just do this section by section.
Okay. So S 325 is an act relating to regional planning and Act 250 tier jurisdiction. And so this bill covers Act 250 as well as some regional planning and the community investment program, all of which were topics in Act 181. So this is kind of a follow-up to Act 181 of 2024. And you will notice that the first 5 sections actually repeal some of the language from Act 181. So first, Section 1 is repealing Section 19 of Act 181, the road jurisdictional trigger that was added in Act 181 for Act 250, also called the road rule. So that is being repealed so that it will not take effect. It has not yet taken effect, and it will not take effect. Section 2 repeals Section 21, which created the definitions for Tier 2 and Tier 3, and also had some of the definition language for Tier 3. That is also being repealed. They had also not yet taken effect, and they will not take effect under this language. Section 3 amends the effective date section of Act 181 to line up with the fact that multiple sections are being repealed. So it's striking those effective dates so that that repealed language will not take effect. The other thing that it's doing is that it is pushing out the effective date for criterion 8C. So that is one of the new that is the new criterion that was added in Act 181 for Act 250. And it's on forest lots and habitat connectors. And currently in Act 181, that statute was to take effect on December 31st of 2026. It is being pushed back to January 1, 2028. Which will facilitate the Land Use Review Board to do additional work on the rules that will go with 8C, and additional public outreach and work on developing those rules. Section 4 repealed the Tier 3 rulemaking process that was already underway, and since Tier 3 is getting repealed, so is the rulemaking. Section 5 repealed the Tier 2 area report, which was going to ask the Land Use Review Board in a few years, next year to report back on additional changes that may be needed to address other things in Tier 2. Tier 2 is going away, so that is also going away. Section 6 starts amending the text, the statutory text of Act 250, and it still relates to Act 181. It is extending the interim housing exemptions that were created in Act 181. In Act 181, there were a couple different dates. The interim housing exemptions were either going to expire on January 1, 2027 or July 2027. Now, all 3 of these exemptions will sunset on January 1, 2028. And to remind you, they are up to 75 units of housing in new town centers, growth centers, or neighborhood development areas, 50 units of housing within a quarter mile around village centers with zoning, subdivision bylaws, sewer, water, proper soils, or 50 units of housing in an urbanized census block along a transit route, and then all housing development within downtowns with permanent zoning and subdivision bylaws. So all three of those exemption categories are being extended to January 1, 2028. Section 7 has some clarifying language to the municipal permit process related to what is currently Tier 1A. It's just clarifying that conditions will be moved from an Act 250 permit to a municipal permit so that it can be enforced by the municipality. Section 8 is amending the Act 181 section related to the Criterion 8 rulemaking. As the rule is being delayed to give them additional time to work on it, and so it is now due to LCAR next year, June 15th, 2026, 2027, because it is currently due June 15th, 2026. There's so many dates in this bill. Section 9 is a session law provision on a public engagement plan. So it is directing the State Natural Resources Conservation Council to work with the Vermont Council on Rural Development and the Vermont Association of Conservation Districts to develop a public engagement plan for how to reach out to Vermonters related to issues on working lands and critical natural resources. This is somewhat in response to the language related to Act 181. So how to develop a public engagement plan so that more voices can be heard as policies are developed in the future. There's a $30,000 appropriation for the development of that plan. Section 10 creates an oversight committee, the Joint Legislative Environmental Oversight Committee, that would have 5 members, 3 from the House, 2 from the Senate, being able to meet up to 6 times per year outside of session. And they would have, having oversight of the permitting process of the Land Use Review Board and Agency of Natural Resources, primarily just meeting with those agencies to see how it's going. No kind of additional stronger verbs other than meeting with and reviewing how the processes are going.
Authority.
No like veto authority or implementation authority, just engagement.
So like joint pension oversight or joint health oversight.
Yes. JITOC, yes, there's quite a few, yeah.
And do the members need to be chairs of money committees?
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, perfect. Section 11 is a session law provision adapting some of the other language that was in Act 181 for the Land Use Review Board to continue to report back on a couple of issues. There's a report asking them to look at commercial activity on farms and whether the Act 250 jurisdiction over those activities need to be adjusted. That's due later this year. There's also a report looking at mitigation of primary agricultural soils for Act 250. That'll be due next year. And then also the effectiveness of jurisdictional triggers and Criteria 9L on addressing sprawl and strip development. Then there's an amendment to 24 VSA 4348. This is in the regional planning statutes, and it has a couple of updates.
Can I find your typo?
Yes,
Okay,
there's one. There's another one where I wrote allow instead of allowing. So there's
It's fine. I just wanted
so the regional planning statute here is being updated. This is the statute that establishes the process for how regional planning commissions get their regional plans approved at the Land Use Review Board. That process was created in Act 181. It's being updated here to create a process where they can do amendments to the plan without going through the full procedural steps of doing a plan readoption. So largely just means that there will be one less public hearing on a plan amendment as opposed to a full plan. And they're calling those non-minor amendments, as opposed to there is a process already for minor amendments. It also has the language related to enhanced energy planning, and that process, merging that with the regional plan update process. That language already passed in H940, so it's identical here so that there's no conflict. Section 11 makes a few. This is section 13, actually. This is the typo. Section 13 amends 24 VSA 4348. This is the statute that establishes the land use categories that are used in the regional plans. There's a few sort of small technical changes that are being added to a couple of the categories. There are references being added to requiring the smart growth principles. there is a change that now says state centers can be the traditional or historic areas of a town, recognizing that some towns are transitioning to different areas that weren't historic for them. Towns can have more than one center. That's a sort of a clarifying amendment. The striking some of the references to the designated areas because those are being adapted into the community investment program areas. Having a consistency change from referencing municipal water and sewer to public water and sewer. And then striking references in the rural category to not have references to the conservation goals or have references to tier 3. Section 14 is adding the language regarding smart growth principles, which is currently in chapter 76A, and it's being moved into chapter 117, the planning and zoning chapter. Section 15 is session law. It's extending any regional or municipal plan that is expiring this year or next year to December 31st, 2027. This is in case the Land Use Review Board review process is delayed at all, making sure that there's no gap when the plan's expired. Section 17, so this starts a couple of changes to the community investment program. This is a successor program to the state designation program. One of the main features of which is the downtown and village center tax credit program. So in this change, we're changing some of the definitions, mostly to streamline them and make sure that they are aligned with the definitions in 4348, which is what they are based on. So yeah, making sure that they cross-reference to that. Section 18 is still in the community investment program section. So this is the language that establishes the new downtown center and village center designation that's part of the program. So it's striking some language that they're, as they're starting to use this program, it's just about to be rolled out. There's some language that's sort of striking, identifying how they're mapped. And then also making sure that the both the Department of Housing and Community Development and the Community Investment Board are providing comments on the areas eligible for this designation during the Land Use Review Board process, and then striking language that's redundant with 4348. Section 19 is adding some clarifying language. I think the intent is for it to be clarifying language to the downtown and village center tax credit program. So currently that program has an eligibility requirement that it is only for buildings that are at least 30 years old. Because of the new community investment program requirements, under the original state designated area program, it was only historic buildings that would qualify, but there are now newer emerging centers that are allowed to qualify for this program as a whole. So language is being added to the tax credit program to clarify that the tax credits still will only go to those buildings that are eligible with the age. So even though more towns and centers will be technically eligible because of their participation in the program, only those buildings that meet the age qualification will be eligible to apply for the tax credits.
You might want to look at that language.
It's like Newtown Center.
That's largely what we're talking about here. Yeah, because the Newtown centers will be incorporated into this. It is clarifying that those buildings will not qualify for tax credits, be eligible to apply for tax credits. All right, let's see. What's there? Here. Oh, good. And so it's over 2 pages. So section 19, amending 32 VSA 5930BB eligibility. So application shall be made in accordance with the guidelines set by the state board. The guideline shall clearly indicate that only applications located in step 2 and step 3 state designated centers, which require the historic eligibility to be on the National Historic Register, or step 1 centers where a portion of the designated center is listed or eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places shall be considered. Okay. That was section 19. Section 20. Section 20 is adding to the community investment program an annual report. That wasn't previously required, but it will have a summary of the board's activities, including any of the incentives that are awarded through that program. Section 21 is also a session law provision. This is a report from the Department of Housing and Community Development on a number of topics related to housing construction and discretionary review, which is a form of zoning review, where the town, it's the way most of the towns currently do zoning, as opposed to like form-based code, which is more objective as opposed to subjective. So there's a few different things that they're asking the department to look at, including a status update on 802 homes program and data on housing built under the interim housing exemptions. And then finally, section 22 updates the environmental justice chapter. The Agency of Natural Resources has been working on this for the last few years and have asked for a couple of the deadlines to be pushed out. And so the annual spending report is being delayed by 1 year to start on January 15, 2029. The ANR's environmental justice rules are delayed until January 1, 2029. The other agencies who will need to adopt environmental justice rules based on ANRs are also being pushed back to July 1, 2030. And then the publishing of the environmental justice mapping tool is being pushed to January 1, 2028.
You remind me when we passed the environmental justice.
Oh, yes, it was 2020.
That sounds right to me.
It's prior to the Home Act. 2020,
It's not that important. It's okay.
okay. But I can get it to you quickly.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Whenever you do, it's fine. The effective date.
effective date is July 1, 2026.
Questions for Ellen? For the committee vote is 11-0.
It was.
Just a question on the change in the designated downtown program, community investment program, whatever, is that also just effective on passage on July 1st?
Yes. Which, was there a specific one you think
I
of?
was just reading through it and I thought, I wonder when these are effective. So yeah, the effective date kind of answers that question. If it's not that, then what? That was at a quick moment that.
Representative Higley.
Representative Kimball, were you asking in particular about the road rule?
No, not at all.
I am.
Okay, go forth and ask.
Answer his really quickly. and
Oh,
then-
yeah, I'm sorry.
So just in case it helps for context, so the community investment program is only going to start when the land use review board is doing the review of the regional plans. So this will take effect hopefully, and they haven't finalized any of those yet, so it should just roll into what is about to start happening.
And then again, my question is, and Alan, there might have been more than just the road rule section that was supposed to take effect July 1st of this year. I'm just concerned that if that section doesn't have upon passage wording, I already know that a lot of people are trying to jump the gun before July 1st and getting in a road. Okay, and I'm just wondering why the road rule section couldn't be upon passage.
Oh, sure, there is a legal reason. So because of the way Act 181 was drafted, this bill is proposing to repeal something that hasn't taken effect yet. And so you have to move the date up in, so it is being repealed in Act 181 on July 1, 2026. So then this will also repeal it on July 1, 2026. It has to be on the same date so that it doesn't actually take effect. So it's a little legally complicated. I had to get assistance to draft this because, yes, the intention is that it shall not ever take effect. And by having this be on the same date, it will just essentially delete it so that it will never take effect.
Okay, again, I just think it's important for people to know, that
That's never going to take effect.
that it's gonna happen. So that they don't have to continue to push between now and July 1st, which they're doing. To get in a road that's over 800 feet.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. Any other questions, Bill? Ted, you're up. Thanks, Ellen. Ellen, you're welcome to sit over here with all of Ted's candy if you'd like.
I'm not hoarding them, I promise.
There's so many things all like trash.
Okay.
Let's try those.
Burnett, Joint Fiscal Office, gonna breeze through the fiscal note, which should be relatively short. It may not be exactly straightforward, but here we go. So the, thinking through, it's maybe helpful to review kind of the structure and fee revenue that was put in place with Act 181, which under that structure, right, there was a group of interim housing exemptions that would exempt projects from Act 250 jurisdiction until the tier 1A and 1B areas were mapped. And it was designed that those interim exemptions would take place in the same, roughly the same area that were going to be in the tier 1A and 1B areas, which tier 1A fully exempt from Act 250 and tier 1B projects that were under 50 units would be exempt from Act 250 jurisdiction. And then concurrent with that, you would have increased Act 250 permit revenue from the road rule jurisdictional trigger and the creation of tier 3 areas. So that was the structure in Act 181. When we're looking at fiscal impact, we're comparing against that as current law in that structure. So thinking about how things might look in the future, all of the changes proposed in this bill would mean that the amount of permit revenue would be less compared to that structure, right? If you're repealing the road rule and tier 3 areas. The extension of the interim exemptions means that the current amount, the current volume of projects that would fall under Act 250 review is remain the same through until those interim exemptions end, and at which point the tier 1A and 1B area would be mapped. So on net, this bill would reduce Act 250 permit revenue compared to that current law structure that was envisioned in 181. And that's largely because you're not getting the additional fee revenue from tier 3 areas and road rule.
Can you, sorry, I don't have any questions. I have questions about the tax credit. I'm not jumping too far ahead. I can wait.
Okay, yes, and this fiscal note's not because that was seen as more of a clarifying change. We didn't really book anything in the fiscal note around it, but
That's actually very helpful to hear.
yes, yep,
Did you not name that in the fiscal note though?
not name that.
Did you name that in the fiscal note
Sure.
for whatever next version?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yep. Yeah, chatted with Ellen a bit about it and just understanding that kind of the various changes to the community investment program were seen as more clarifying, aligning kind of definitions with pieces and statutes. It didn't see a huge scope change. You
You didn't see a scope change.
did not see a scope change yet.
Okay.
Yep.
Narrowing though? I think it's a narrowing of eligible projects or eligible projects.
For the tax credits,
Yeah.
the tax credits, I don't think were ever intended to go to projects that weren't historically valuable. And so this is just clarifying that even though in a new town center, they would theoretically be eligible for the tax credit, like theoretically, I don't think that was ever the intent. So I guess if you're narrowly looking at current law, like theoretically you're narrowing it, but I think this is more seen as a clarification that no one was intending to distribute those tax credits to buildings that weren't historically on the historic register.
It's also the fact there's more demand on the amount of tax credits available.
And you don't have to be on the historic register, you just have to be
Worthy.
worthy of the historic register, right? Because that's a process to get on the historic register.
Yeah, it's actually two-pronged because the tax credit program itself lists the eligibility specifically, which is different from the state register. And it's 30 years in the tax credit program and it's 50 years for the national register. But the program, the designated area program requires that the center have buildings eligible for the national historic register.
That's perfect, thank you.
Yeah, do you have a figure on the Act 250 piece you were talking about?
No, not specific. The only piece we can comment on is we talked with the Land Use Review Board, and back when we were all looking at this bill under Act 181, their estimate was that the interim exemptions would reduce Act 250 revenue by about $900,000. And that seems to have borne out. And so as long as those interim exemptions are in effect, that's about the scope of decreased Act 250 revenue. And I wouldn't put myself on the record to say it would continue, however, but would note that the interim exemption areas, I've seen some testimony that those are not a perfect match, but they're similar in scope to the newly created tier 1A and 1B areas, or what their potential scope might be, I should say. Yes. So moving on to two additional more appropriations focused issues. Oh no, there are two appropriation focused issues and then one very small tiny fee addition that I will go into. So section 9 would would task the State Natural Resources Council with hiring a contractor to create a plan for public engagement. The bill includes an appropriation for $30,000 from the general fund to the council to hire that contractor. The section 10 would create the oversight committee. I will note that I forgot to update this fiscal notice reflective of a slightly earlier version of the bill that mentioned 8 meetings. It's really 6 meetings. Totally fine as a last minute thing. I just missed it. And instead of $11,000 per year, I did the math and the chair on the side. It's a little bit more than $8,000 if they meet those 6 meetings from the budget of the General Assembly. And then finally, in section 12, the non-minor land use map amendments that can be filed as part of regional plan amendment. Statute references a $295 fee that was created in Act 181 that these would pay.
Ooh, pays.
So the people who are filing the regional plan, so regional planning commissions, they would file the plan to the Land Use Review Board as a part of, for them to review when the Land Use Review Board is reviewing that regional plan or that amendment.
We put that in 181. Oh, very.
We don't know how many non-minor land use map amendments will be filed, so there's no way to put an estimate on the amount of revenue that could be generated, but one to flag those to be, it's in the bill.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, folks, anyone have any questions for Ted? Thank you.
Sure. And I will send an update correcting the number of meetings and adding context around the tax credit for folks. Yep.
Anyone need anything else from us?
Sure. Madam Chair, I move that we find favorable S235 as presented.
Representative Penfield moves we find S325 favorable. I knew what you meant. And any discussion? Yes.
Yeah. In general terms,
I can't hear you at all. I'm so sorry.
sorry, in general terms, I know why we ended up where we are. It's only past 181 and a lot of things went sideways. And I've talked to a number of people here, there and everywhere, we all have about where we are. And this seems to me the practical result given how we work here. I think that there's personally, I wish that the process had evolved differently and we could have spent more time working through the things, the meritorious parts of Act 181 and come up with a better solution. But this solves the problem for now. And so that's how we are. And that's okay. I'm happy to support it.
I think the Natural Resources Committee did some pretty careful work over the last couple weeks. I just want to say I, for one, am happy that the pieces of 181 that are going to really promote housing in downtown and village centers are still
They were
there.
very
I
hard.
know they're very important
Very
too.
hard. Understood.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, clerk, please call the roll. Thank you.
Representative Brannigan.
Yes.
I'll vote yes. As Representative Burkhart, Representative Higley,
Yes,
Representative Polka,
Yes.
Representative Kimball,
Yes.
Representative Maslin.
Yep.
Representative Odie is not here. I assume she's not voting today remotely. Representative Page,
Yes.
Representative Wazazak,
Yes.
Representative Canfield,
Yes.
and Representative Kornheiser.
Yes,
We have voted the bill favorable 10-0-1.
thank you, everyone. We are done for the day.
That's correct. I'm not voting.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Carol. We're done for the day. The yield bill is passed in the Senate. If you want, people want to read the final versions, we'll schedule more testimony on that schedule for tomorrow. Miscellaneous tax is still in between. Thank you, Ellen. Miscellaneous tax is still attracting all the amendments it can at every moment. And I'll see you all tomorrow at 9.